Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second free class for the month of July on how to pronounce ED endings. Hi, my name is Jennifer, as most of you know, and I am the owner of Tarle Speech and Language Services, and we specialize in pronunciation training for English as a second language speakers. Thank you for coming today. We are going to talk about ED endings. And before we begin, I know that there have been some issues with my audio quality. I have been working hard to fix those, and I have a new microphone today and a new setup. So fingers crossed that this works. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, if you have questions, please put them below the video, or you can also email me. There's a contact page on www.tarlespeech. That's TARLESPEECH.com. You can go ahead and send me questions that way as well. And I will have handouts posted to my website by later today. So our agenda for today is to talk about what is a root word and a suffix. What is voicing, which is going to be very important. We need to know what voicing is, especially at the end of the word, to apply this ED rule. And just as a quick tip, if you watched my class last week on S endings, there are two versions of that to watch. Both, again, the audio isn't that great, but from the feedback I've gotten, the content is pretty good. The rule follows the same concept, is that the voicing at the end of the word then will lead us to know how to say the ED sound when we add it on. And of course, as with all my classes, we end with practice. Okay, so what is a prefix, root word, and suffix? Let's go ahead and talk about this. Okay, so many English words are formed by taking a basic word and then adding a little tiny portion to the beginning and a little tiny portion to the end. The portion that we add to the beginning is called a prefix, and what we add at the end is called a suffix. So a root word can stand alone all by itself, like the word happy, and we can add something at the beginning and the end, unhappily, to change the meaning of that word. Or in some cases, it can't stand alone at all. In the case of reject, ject is the root word, and that word can't really stand alone. So let me go ahead and share my screen again so you could see a good example here. So if we look at this, again, a prefix is the part of the word with a specific meaning that comes at the beginning. A suffix is used at the end of a word, and it changes, adds meaning, or shows grammar. And the root word is the main part of the word. It contains the core meaning. So if we add this together, we can say the word happy, unhappy, which means not happy, happily, which changes this to an adverb to describe an action. I did that happily. Or we can add both the prefix and the suffix and say unhappily. And we're going to be having some classes at a later date on how these prefixes and suffixes change the syllable stress and the beats in a word. Okay, so what is voicing? Let me show you me again. Hello again. Okay, so your voice box is in your throat. This is part of speech. When your voice box vibrates, it makes sound. All vowel sounds are voiced. So if you hold your throat and you say A, E, I, O, U, A, E, I, all of those sounds, your voice box, this right here, it's vibrating. This is your larynx. That's the technical term. So that's going to be vibrating. A lot of consonant sounds are voiced, but then this is the confusing part. Some of them aren't voiced. And what makes this even more confusing is that some consonant sounds look exactly the same. They're made exactly the same with your mouth, The only difference is what's happening in your throat with voicing. So let's go through. We're going to go through all the consonant combinations or the pairs that have a voiced and a voiceless counterpart and feel your throat vibrating and watch my mouth so you can kind of see that they look exactly the same, but this is the difference, okay? Here's the best news. Most people only make a mistake with voicing at the end of a word. I do often see people confuse voicing for the Z sound everywhere in a word, but that's more because of spelling. This rule that I'm going to instruct you on today, the reason people struggle with it is because voicing at the end of the word is very confusing for foreign speakers. So let's go ahead and look at each of these combinations. Okay, so the first thing we're going to try is the P sound. Put your hand here and feel. P, p, p. Now try the B sound. B, b, b. The P has no voicing. The B has voicing. B, b, b. Now let's go to the T and the D. T, t, t. D, d, d. K, k, k. G, g, g. So you can see my mouth looks exactly the same. The air's puffing out the same way. My mouth is doing the same thing. My tongue, my lips, my jaw. The only difference is down here. Let's do 3 more combinations. Ch, j, s, z, and f, v. Now, let me share my screen again so you can see this. This little tiny bit of voicing can change these words and make them an entirely new word. One little thing voicing. So right here, cap, the C and the A, the ca, it's exactly the same here, cap. Oh, I need to fix this. I just saw a mistake. That should be a B. So we have cap and cab. Let's look down here so you don't get confused. Sorry about that mistake. Hat, had. Hat, had. The only difference here is the voicing. And if you listen very carefully, that voicing does impact that vowel before it, and it sounds a little tiny bit longer in this word. Back, bag, etch, edge, hiss, his. Yes, this is a Z sound. Oftentimes, we pronounce words with the letter S as a Z sound in American English. And last, off and of. This is an exception. Typically, the letter F is pronounced as an F sound. Here, we pronounce it as a V in the word of. Off, of. Excellent. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so how do we say a T sound? Oh, I'm sorry. What are the common mistakes for the ED at the end of a word? I hear people say T all of the time. So people will say cult instead of called. People will say nothing and say back instead of back, backed. And they will say an ID and they will say wished instead of wished. Here we go. I got ahead of myself. How do we say this T sound? So our mouth is going to be slightly open. The tip of your tongue, that part right there, is going to touch the back of your top front teeth. T, t, t. To be really specific, it touches right where my teeth meet the skin on the roof of my mouth. So t, t, t. The airflow is going to puff out and our voice is off. It's not on. T, t, t. Now the D sound, same thing. Your mouth is slightly open. The tip of the tongue is in the same spot, right behind the top of those, the back of your top front teeth, right between the skin and the roof of your mouth. The difference here is the voice is on. D, d, d. So t, t, t. D, d, d. Okay, there we go. My PowerPoint wasn't moving. So let's talk about this rule. How do we pronounce? How do we say the ED ending when it's added to a word? The ending changes depending on the sound that comes before it. So the sound, not necessarily the letter, the sound. So if the word ends in a T or D sound, T or D, we're going to add id. If it ends in a voiceless sound, we're going to add T. And if it ends in a voiced sound, we're going to add D. If you think about it, this makes incredible sense because a voiceless sound is going to come with another voiceless sound, that T, but the voiced sound is going to go with the voiced sound, the D. And then I think about the id. I try to say words that maybe end in T or D, and then you might have to add another T or D. It's almost impossible. So you can't say t. That's very confusing, or d. But it's easy to say tid or did when you add that on. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at some words. So if a word ends in a T or D sound, here are a few examples. Melt. We add the id, melted. If it ends in a D sound, trade, we pronounce it as an id, traded. And again, think about it. It would be hard to say melt or melted, but it's easier to add that id because we're adding that vowel between there. So melted, traded. The word ends in a voiceless sound. Oops, I have another mistake. I'm so sorry. We are going to then add the D sound. So I'll give you a few examples. I'm sorry. If the word ends in a voiceless sound, we're going to add another voiceless sound, that T sound. So we have tap, tapped, talk, talked, cough, coughed, bath, bathed, wish, wished, crunch, crunched, and pass, passed. Now let's listen to the next set. When the word ends in a voiced sound, we're going to add another voiced sound, that D. Buzz, buzzed, clean, cleaned, called, tabbed, tagged, loved, breathed, calmed, hired, judge, sewed. So I know it's hard not seeing those words, but again, remember, pronunciation is so much about listening. So listening practice is so important. So trust yourself. Even if you don't 100% know the word that I'm saying and you're kind of getting a little bit confused, don't worry. It'll come in time. Listen to me saying the words without reading them to really train that listening. And then you'll start to trust yourself a little bit more too. Okay, so now we're going to get into some practice. That's what everybody is typically waiting for. So I'm not going to show you the words just yet. I'm going to go ahead and read them and I'm going to have you listen. So just listen and then I'm going to give you a turn to practice. Edited, dated, added, voided, wiped, passed, liked, graphed, sobbed, paged, moved, find. Okay, now I'm going to show you the words. I know that's typically what everybody is waiting for. There they are. Okay, so now I'm going to say each word and repeat after me. Edited, dated, added, voided, swiped, passed, liked, graphed, sobbed, paged, moved, find. Now try these on your own. Try the first row, edited, dated, added, voided. The next one, swiped, passed, liked, graphed. Sobbed, paged, moved, find. Excellent. How'd you do? Not bad, huh? Pretty easy once you kind of stop and think about it, and you can kind of get that feel in your throat, which helps you then figure out which sound comes next. Some of my clients do describe this a little differently than I would, and they would say that the voiced sounds are a little bit harder and deeper. If that works for you, that's fine. So whatever works for you, as long as you say it correctly. One other thing just to keep in mind as we move into sentences is that in connected speech, which is when we have words all together, when we're talking or reading, sounds that come before a sound influence the sound that comes after it. So again, we know this because we've been talking about this rule. This also happens in sentences. So sometimes that ending sound that we're putting on, it might not be a very strong D. It might sound a little bit softer to you. Still a D. It's just a little bit softer perhaps because of the sound that comes after it. And the only reason I'm pointing this out, I know that's kind of a more advanced topic, is because people want something to be very specific and exact. And unfortunately, in this case, because speech is so fluid and there's so much movement to it and so many things involved, there is a little bit of influence. So just don't worry about that too much. Just practice the rule and that will come in time. Okay, so let's move on to sentences. Just listen. She moved the files and avoided disaster. Is that dated correctly? Becky sobbed when she heard she would be moved. Okay, so go ahead and try those 3 sentences. Okay, excellent. This is getting even a little more advanced. So words would be easiest. Sentences are next. Then when you're answering a question, this is difficult because then you're creating a sentence and using this rule to respond. So what we're going to do for this is I'm going to say the question, then you repeat the question. Okay, let's practice that. Where have you lived? Now I want you to answer the question. I have lived in Pittsburgh, Kent, Ohio, and in San Jose, California. Okay, so repeat the question after me. What did you shop for on vacation? Now I'm going to answer the question and then you answer it any way that you want to. I shopped for a piece of art for my living room. Repeat the last question. What were you motivated by in college? Now answer the question. I'll go first. I was motivated by graduating so that I could make money. Okay. And this will be most difficult. It's a paragraph. So this is great to practice. You can pick any paragraph from the internet and go ahead and give that a try. I really like the website Breaking News English. The gentleman who runs the website records paragraphs, news articles, various things, and you can listen to it and then practice. So that's like a nice little intermediate step, is to have something to listen to before you actually say it yourself. So that's a great website to go to if you're interested. Okay, so I'm going to read the paragraph and then you go ahead and take a turn. Last weekend, I traveled to Pittsburgh. I shopped and visited friends and family. Unfortunately, I forgot my credit card and only had budgeted $100 for meals. I called my friend to tell her the bad news that I had used all of my money. Graciously, my friend treated for dinner. It was a fun time and we planned to catch up on my next trip. Okay, give it a try. Okay, how did you do? A little bit harder, I know. That's okay. It gets easier as you practice, and just take your time. You do not have to be as fast as I am. Okay, so a lot of people ask me, how do I do this? I wish you were with me all the time. I can't live in your pocket. So here's what I suggest. First, start by learning to hear the difference. Listen for this rule. It's kind of nice if you watched last week's class. You can listen for the rule that's going to impact two different things, the S ending and this ED ending, because you're listening for that voicing at the end of words. So really listen for that, really pay attention to that, and listen for when people add an S or add that ED letters, those letters to the end of words, and listen to how they say those words. I think you'll kind of be surprised how many times you hear that, and that you've really maybe never noticed before that we changed the sound based on that ending sound. Then move into practice like we did today. Start simple. Start with words, then move into sentences, then into paragraphs. Then you can start using it in conversation. Oftentimes you can take a class like this and then go off and use it a little bit, but it's going to be hard for you to do this consistently, because not only right now, you can do it consistently later, because you really have to learn the rule and really train your mouth and your brain and your throat to do this all of the time. And then practice, practice, practice. All right, so when you're practicing, it is awesome if you can look away from what is written on the page at all. So maybe if you can read the sentence and then look away and say the sentence, because then you're not going to be relying on your reading skills. You're going to be relying on what you hear and what your mouth and your throat are doing, which is very, very important. You can also teach a friend and then correct each other. That's great, especially because this class is recording right now and it'll be up on YouTube. You can share this with a friend and then the two of you can work together. So even if you're not living in a country with native English speakers, that's okay. You can go ahead and practice this. If you are living in the US, please ask a friend if you want someone to correct your speaking. Most people won't. They don't want to offend you. So make sure, especially at work and work situations, that you do tell a trusted colleague if you want someone to correct your speaking or your grammar or your pronunciation. And they will tell you, and in most cases, people are very discreet about it and they're not going to say something in front of a lot of people. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me today. Okay, fingers crossed that the audio worked out really, really well. Since I was really working on the audio, I did not have any of the live chat up. I will be able to see that though once I stop the broadcast, and I will respond to any questions that were happening on the live chat below the video. So look for responses there. If you like this, please share with a friend. If you want more information, please visit our website, www.tarlespeech.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm trying Instagram. It's a work in progress. I also have some pages for practice for today's lesson on my website, and I submitted them to iTunes. Those should be up soon in the iBooks iTunes store if you're looking for those for your Apple products. So thank you again. I greatly appreciate it. And join us for the next 2 Thursdays, same time, same place, for 2 more free classes. And there are details on those on my website. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you next week. Take care.